John Bonaventura back again, a second time, which is great. Loved having you on the first time we said that we'd get you back on. And um, the thing here is things have changed. You are no longer the head football coach at Temecula Valley. You stepped down after the season, and um, one of the pushes that I've been making in the last couple months is to really talk more transparently about everything from the state of college football to the state of high school football to transfers to NIL to this to that, because that's the reality. That's the world we're living in. So I know you and I had a conversation and just wanted to bring you on and kind of talk to you about the overall state of high school athletics, specifically football. So thanks for coming on, man.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You have any idea what your next step are? Are you going to keep coaching, you think?
No, I'm not looking to coach. I really miss being at the pro level scouting. That I have, a lot, I think 20 years, 22 years between the NFL and the CFL. And that's kind of where I think, to ride this thing out until I decide to hang up the whistle. Um, I think the building part of the team, the scouting part, right? Trying to get the pieces, go out on the road, evaluate your team, find that missing piece that can help you win a championship. I'm at this point where, I want to give it all and just try to win a couple of more Grey Cups.
Well, good. So are you gonna stay there in Southern California, you think? Can you do everything from down there?
Right. So, just like any NFL team, the CFL has area or regional scouts. So whether it's with, Toronto or Winnipeg or Hamilton, the teams that I've spent time with, I've always been the West Coast regional. So I technically would, scout like the AFC, NFC West. I'd be in charge of like watching all the transactions, keeping up to date on rosters, who they sign, who they release. We're looking for those guys to get released around the street and to evaluate them, the bottom half of an NFL roster. So I'll go to all the training camps. I'll spend a day or two, from LA to Seattle and hit all the West Coast teams and write up, 25 guys per team that, might be on the bubble. And if they become available, then, we make the call to their agent or to the player themselves and say, hey, we have an opportunity. We think you could play, for us in the CFL, you want to come Canada. So, it's that building part behind the scenes right now that I'm really more interested in anything.
Good. So remind everybody and remind me, refresh my memory. How long were you the head coach at Temecula Valley?
Three seasons. I
3
finished three
seasons.
seasons.
Um, so yeah, let's get into it. What are your thoughts just in general with the state of high school athletics and how everything is going on between, open enrollment, transfers, and I know my big thing, and I've kind of stayed quiet for a couple years, but the administration support from my standpoint has really taken a nosedive. And I'm not sitting here saying that the administrators are less efficient or worse or better or anything like that. There's just a change of mindset, in my opinion, within the administration avenue of both high school and college. And I first started seeing it 20 years ago in college football with athletic
Mhm.
directors shifting from being former coaches at any sport to
Right.
business people. And
Correct.
then about, gosh, probably 5, 7 years ago, I started seeing it in high school sports where athletic directors, principals were coming in and specifically athletic directors, and they didn't have a sport background, or principals who wanted this great athletic department that won a lot, that created great cultures, that succeeded in the classroom, on the field, in the community, at home, but had never been involved in athletics whatsoever. Mm, I think, there's a guy in out of Arizona, and this is happening all over the place, that was at a school for 2 years and got fired after going 11-11, and he was there for 2 years. So, what's your kinda take on where high school athletics is starting to go?
I think every state is different, but I think in our state, in California, uh, it's taken a big backseat. It's about keeping kids in the classroom, right? It's the ADA. It's the dollar. How do we keep kids in school? How do we keep them in the classrooms? Athletics, for the most part, at most schools, is just it's dang near an intramural situation. If kids want to play, let them play. If they don't want to play, they don't want to play. I do know that there was a time 10 years ago, around 10 years ago, that there were many districts in Southern California that were looking at um, dropping all athletics. And it was something that the state of California was looking at in Sacramento and going to the private schools. That if you wanted to play and you felt that you were that type of a player, then you would go to the private schools. There's less private schools. They would get funded for athletics. When you look at a public school, the amount of money and time and effort that goes into running an athletic program is tremendous on the business side for no return. Now, you and I, we can argue, yes, you create culture, you create leaders, you create, camaraderie, you create discipline. There's a lot of things that we can do with it. But if you're looking from a financial standpoint for a high school to run an athletic program, now, I can tell you that the budget that we had at Temecula Valley, we're around 2,800 kids. We have about 150 to 60 kids come out for the program. That's all three, freshman, JV, varsity.
Right, right.
And the budget's somewhere around $200,000, right? So, the district would cover,
Now,
I think,
John,
nine
sorry, let me
schools.
interrupt you for a sec. Because every state does it. So when you say that budget, is that the athletic budget that's set forth by the district? Does it also include your booster club, your fundraisers and stuff like that? Or is that 200,000 just simply coming from the district or the school's athletic fund?
No school, no district.
Okay. Okay.
So we don't, and many of what I'm hearing, and I'm talking to other coaches around, our county, Orange County, San Diego County, is that the schools have cut the funding. We cut funding for athletics pretty much almost to none several years ago here in our school district. So for me, when I sit down and budget, when I sit down with our president, booster club president, and the AD, and I say, okay, well, I've got to have, you know, 20 coaches, from freshmen on up. And then I have to buy footballs. I've got to buy helmets. The district is responsible for reconditioning,
Well, that's
but
good.
they are not responsible to replace the helmets that got rejected. Right. So, if you have a Rydell helmet, 10 years, regardless if it's good or not, it's gone. Right. So you kind of have to watch how you buy helmets in increments. So I've been buying helmets, a certain number of helmets every year for the last 3 years. Come 2027, 29, we're not getting hit with, 80 helmets getting rejected. Now you got this huge bill. I try to keep it to a certain number, each year. So we're fully funded. So not only do we, the stipends, the district does give me 7 stipends that I can use. And then the rest of them, come from the booster club. Buying of helmets, booster club, shoulder pads, replacement jerseys, banquet awards, transportation. We have to pay our school district bus transportation. Now, with that is the kids have to raise the money. The district tells me I have to give their bus drivers first right of refusal if they can't do it. So let's just say we have a game, like in Corona or out in Orange County, and we have to leave. I'm going to say 3:00. Well, the school buses can't do it because they're still en route getting kids out of school home, right? So so now I can go to charter. And the charters really aren't much more. You're talking a few $100s more for a charter, which are nicer, right? Nicer buses. The kids deserve it. They've earned it. They've gone out. They've raised the money. But I just can't go out and get a charter bus until I float it through our transportation department and make sure that, they get the first right of refusal. So there's a lot of expense that goes into a football program. Now, with that, kind of the college model, right? The more people you get involved on the outside to give you money, the more people that think they have influence on what you do. Come into practice. I may have a dozen practices on parents on any given night at practice, and it's, why aren't you using this kid? Why aren't you running this? Why are what drill is that for? And it's a lot of not really knowing the program or what I would like to do at my, what that week is for. Each week, as a former player and coach, I can't run the same stuff I run last week. Everybody watches film. So you got to do your wrinkles. Well, why are you doing this wrinkle? Why aren't you using this kid this week? And because the parents support the program feel that they're entitled, like, I need to sit with them each week and kind of give them a rundown of what we're doing. Um, I'm not that guy. I'm too old. I'm not, I'm an old school guy. I'm not going to run by you that, this is the game plan this week. This is why we're practicing from, 6 to 8 and not 5 to 7. And then when they want to go to your administration's like, that's you. Sorry, we don't get into those conversations. So you could probably find it, but there was a situation where, with myself and some of the parents, and they went public. They went social media, and I just said, okay. After this game, I went to admin, and what can you do? Comment was, we don't get into those type of altercations with parents. You can hand out however you want. And I said, okay, that's perfect. We have one more game, and I'm not your guy. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, After this game, we'll qualify for the playoffs. And this was a program that I took over that was in a mix, right? They're financially a disaster, got them out of trouble financially. They've got money in the bank. We fixed all the equipment, replaced all the jerseys. We've been 5-5, went 4-6, 5-5, 5-5. Qualified for the playoffs 2 years in a row. Team GPA has been above a 3.5. Last year we were 3.86. So I've been holding standards, and then when it got to that, and I'm like, yeah, where's my help? From an administrative point, when do you step in to back your coaches, or when do you help your coaches and just let me coach football? And
Right.
I said, at the end of this, I'm not your guy. If this is what you want is an intramural program, and parents get a lot of say of what's happening, then and we're not all on the same page where it's, hey, just have a good time as long as Johnny plays, we're all good. That's where I was like, that it's not that it's wrong. If that's what a school wants, that's what a school wants, but it just wasn't me. Um, so that's why I want to return to the pro level where you show up every day to work and your job's to win a championship.
Well, I think, you know, the problem with it, John, is that kind of stuff is happening everywhere.
Yeah,
It's just not in Southern California. It's just not in your district. It's just not at your high school. It's happening everywhere. And eventually, and I've known this for a long time, everything starts these trends, if you will, and I'm not saying this is a trend, but trends start in California and work their way east across the country. That's
right.
usually just what happens. They may start on the East Coast too, and then they meet in the middle. But what you're describing and what's going on, I have firsthand knowledge from my own experiences. Oscar McBride at Marietta Mesa won a CIF championship 2 seasons ago and
Mhm.
stepped down and without divulging, and I know you've spoken to him, he's seen it firsthand. And the issue is, in Arizona, the districts every 3 years would purchase, new uniforms, just one new set, right? A home or away. Um, Sometimes, but the school athletic budget was like 25K, and then everything else, we were required to raise. The district did handle buses, even if we had to use a charter bus. Um, for games, for competitions, but it's eventually that's going to go away, and it's going to be a model similar to what you stepped into, where the football program is required to raise all the money for their program, replace helmets that, like you said, you need to get 15, 20 new helmets every year, just so at the end of the helmet cycle you still have some, and that's a
Right.
continue. It's nice that the school or the district pays for reconditioning, because most people don't know how much that costs, and it costs a lot. Not
Yes.
as much as a new helmet, but it still costs a lot. But, um, you know, and then to as coaches, as head coaches, you know, we work with our booster club and having to go to the district or the school to get approval to purchase things
Right.
when we've raised all that money, that I've never understood that, and it happens everywhere. And so, you know, what you're describing, you know, the parents and I know, you know, most of you parents out there are exceptional parents. You're great fathers,
100%.
you know, and we enjoy being around you and talking to you. But it's that 10% that just kinda taint the whole bundle, and
Yeah, I've heard, that from talking to coaches and athletic directors, you're spending 90% of your time with 10% of the population. And it really, really starts to get to it, because the amount of time that we put into it as coaches, for there's no money. We don't get we don't make any money.
not at that level.
I get a small district stipend, but they add that stipend into my normal teacher's pay. So by the time I get done with taxes, it's not a separate check, it's included. So, by the time I'm done with taxes, and then throughout the year, all of us coaches are doing little things, like purchasing something, you know, um, we do game socks. That's one of the things that I require is they, we have whatever the pants or jersey, whatever, we go a gold or a brown or a white sock. And then obviously in October we do the pink.
Right.
um, and if it's, coming up short or we need it overnight or within a few days, and you know what, I'm putting it on my credit card and I'm going to Amazon. Now I get reimbursed by the Booster Club. They'll help me out, but it's the things that we do to help these kids. With that, I was maintaining a 3.0. If you didn't have a 3.0, then we had to sit down and talk because you're in high school. There isn't too many other things that you had to do. So, we set that, and, the financial part, the transfer part, and it just, after a
Well,
while,
yeah.
it's one
I
of it.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just say, it gets to you because you're like, it shouldn't be like this. All I want to do is help kids grow and mature and coach football.
Well, I mean, and that's why we got into it, right? Especially at the high school level. I mean, we've talked before about the service model of coaches, especially high school coaches. You know, we're there to serve, and I know for me personally, when that serving felt like it was, I don't know the correct word I want to use, but just when I felt like I wasn't serving, like I always felt like I was serving the kids, and that's what I got into it for, right? That never stopped. But what transpired is I went from spending a lot of, you know, 50% of my times serving the kids directly and another 30% serving the kids indirectly, and
Right.
20% of the time dealing with everything else. And I know we signed up to be head coaches, and that's what you take on as a head coach. You take on everything. I would
Right.
do it again. I love being a head coach. It's where I want to be, right? But it went from that 50-30-20 to probably 10 to 20% of my time. It flipped. 10 to 20% of my time, it was direct serving the kids to um 20% maybe serving them directly, and then 60% of the 60 to 70% was everything else. You know, and when I say everything else, I'm talking about spending time sending out recruiting lists, working with college coaches to get kids recruited, checking on grades, talking to teachers, admin coming to me and say, well, this kid that quit, his mom emailed us and said this, that, and the other about you, or about this coach, or about that coach, or getting a call from opposing coach, freshman coach saying, hey, your coach said this after the outside of
Right.
serving the kids administrative responsibility had gone from 20% to 60 to 70%. And that's not why I got into it.
Right.
And, you know, you talked about, you know, I think it was your admin saying, hey, you know, parents, you know, we're not dealing with parents, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, it's And most admins deal with it that way because they're not coaches. Because a coach that's an athletic director would understand that as a head football coach, specifically as a head football coach, you're going to get parents left and right, coming at you. And one of their jobs as an athletic director is to block for you, is to keep that away from you and know and trust that they hired you to build a culture, create leaders, yeah, to win football games, do great in the classroom, in the community, be quality people. That is at the forefront at the high school level. And so saying we don't deal with parents, they don't deal with parents until they don't agree with something as an admin, they don't agree with something you do as a head coach, and then they use that against you. So, you know, um,
And honestly, I haven't had that type of experience with my
good.
they've been supportive, they've been good to me, but when the really heavy stuff starts coming, they were hands off, as far as helping getting some things done on campus, getting a zero period, getting a freshman class, getting certain things, they've been supportive. It's not like I had I have a good administration here. It's just when, the 5% start barking, it's like, "Sorry, coach," like, "We're not gonna get into those things."
Right.
And I
I
made
got you.
mistakes. I'm not this generation of a coach. You have a lot of parents who wanna be their children's friend, and it's everyone else in the world, against my kid. When I started coaching, we have these conversations. I've had them with Oscar and Deshaun and different coaches in the area. When we played, coach said, "Run," we ran. We did what we're supposed to do. And then around the 90s, I started noticing like mid 90s, whatever, getting close to 2000, it was okay, coach, why are we running? I used to say it's the why generation. Like, why are we running? Why are we got to do these drills? Why are we doing this after practice? And now we're at a point, because we've lost structure, the entitlement, and we've lost structure. No one wants to be the bad guy and say no. Right. So it's because now it's, why do I have to do it? And what's in it for me? Because I know we got to do it, and you're telling me I got to do it. And I know that you're saying it is beneficial to help me get bigger, stronger, faster, smarter. But what's in it for me? Because if it's not a Division I scholarship at the end of this, well, then maybe I'm not going to do it as hard, what you really want. I'll do it just enough. So if there's no, I say the TikTok, or the Instagram, if I'm not getting my likes and I'm not getting my stuff, then why am I really doing this? Like I dealt with some very strange things, like people on the sidelines this year. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Well, this is from someone with a credential, right? They're in the coach's block. Like they're like in my area on the sideline. I'm being paid. I was hired to take pictures of these 5 kids. Well, who's paying you? Well, it's either the kids are paying them or a parent is paying these outside sources, and they're going, and you're on the sideline. So now are you doing this, taking reps and doing what you need to do because it's helping us win and be better? Or are you doing this because you got somebody taking photos and it's going to be on your Instagram later and you're going to try to create a highlight reel? Because at the end of it, and it's hard to get parents to understand. I've been doing this a long time. Is that no college in the country reads publications and says your son is a 4-star, 3-star. They don't look at stars. They do their own grading. Now they're going to come to me. They're going to ask for a list. They're going to get access to Huddle, and they grade their own. All that stuff that they're going through, and I need to get my film, and I got to get my highlights, and I got to have it on Twitter, and I've got to have it on this because that's how I'm going to get a scholarship. It doesn't work that way. They're still coming through me. They're still coming through the school. They're still going to come and they're going to sit in the stands and watch a game or a half. Our area, you can watch a half of one school and you can get across town 3 miles. So you can watch like a half, of another school. And they're not telling anyone they're coming. They're just going to go sit in the stand. So it's become like, what's in it for me? And that was a turning point for me when I started to see the kids of like, well, you know, what's in it for me? Like, what am I going to get from it? And that didn't make sense to me because I don't do this for the money and I don't do it for recognition. I never have. I just do it because I love football. I mean, 36 years, right? So that kind of, when I saw that coming through this year, it was like, okay, And I sat with my admin and I said, not that it's right or wrong, it's just not me. I'm not the right fit for what's
Right.
going right now, right here.
Yeah. Well, I and let me clarify something. When I was going off on, administration and
Mhm,
those are, I wasn't necessarily referring to your administration. So, I know the administrations I was with, my athletic directors at both schools as a head coach were extremely supportive and,
mhm.
ran interference for me. Guys I talk to, not only on this program when we're off camera, but just friends I have that, choose to step down from coaching or switch schools or stuff like that. The majority of those stories on the why is because, my AD didn't have my back. And
Right.
seeing that with, you know, coming to a head at the end usually, in my dad's career in the SC job and then the Missouri job, but initially super supportive. But then, the business aspect of college football takes over. And if you're not winning as much, then but at the high school level, I hear horror stories like that. So I just want to make sure
Yeah, it's out there. Like I said, I've got a good admin to nice people, but if you want to run a program, and I'm not asking to be IMG, modern day. I'm not asking to be at that, but what are we in this for? And when you feel that the culture on your campus from top down is like, let's just have a good time and 5-5 is okay. That's where I was like, I just don't know if this is for me at this spot. Maybe I coach at another institution where it's different and, winning is looked upon different. And, you know, um, but, with that, and again, you get into the academics and you get into the transfers, the whole thing is just, it's like, at this point, I don't think I'm the guy.
yeah. What do you think? Because I know, like in Arizona, and I know it's happening in Utah and stuff like that, but there are a lot of charter schools popping up. I mean, a ton of charter schools. And, obviously privately funded. I know in Arizona, they still get federal money, although they're privately funded. And they're popping up everywhere. And from a financial and I think that's where, I really have a problem is we're talking about, we started off talking about from a financial standpoint of high
Mhm.
school athletics.
Right.
When did, like you said, when did the joy of playing high school athletics, being a high school athlete and being involved and learning life lessons and being a part of something bigger than yourself and forming relationships that last a lifetime, when did that change to it being more about financials? It sounds to me like what you're saying, and I know it happened. It's at the college level for sure, where athletics has now become a business. Is that where you sees kind of happening at least in Southern
Yeah,
California?
I do. I see it. And I know that there was talk, like I said, around 2015, around 10 years ago, when I started hearing things talking about public schools not wanting to fund athletic department because of the cost. And if you want to, then go to the private school. If you think you're that type of a player, then go to the private school and they're going to raise the money and you can, pay your tuition or, however they do it. But when it got to the social media really became popular, with Instagram and TikTok, and Twitter and things were out there and you were able to do your own thing, and you started to see YouTube, right, where kids were making their own money. Kids are making six-figure money on just doing a YouTube channel, right, on things that they do. Now, I mean, you've seen it. I see guys doing these videos, these coaching videos of mechanics or whatever, a quarterback at these parks. I'm like, and he's got thousands of subscribers. Technique is horrible. I'm like, please stop. Like, don't teach that, right? And I'm not going to get down there and get into a debate with a person who's doing this. But when it's out there and, and kids and people are starting to see the financial part, I have a student who's in one of my classes right now who's a decent student and good athlete. And I said, how come you're not playing sports? Well, I have my own YouTube channel and I have a bike, like an e bike. and does all these stunts on these e-bikes and got all these followers and making all this money. And I'm like, well, I can't argue with you, right? I can't say, well, why are you doing that? You should be playing football or soccer, um, because they have this stuff going on. So there's so many other avenues out there that, and you're not seeing because of social media also, is that you and I can stay in touch like now, where before we had to go to a studio. We had to meet up, get together, have a cup of coffee, talk about the show, and then we're going to go do the show. Now we can do this. Kids can stay in contact with each other all day. Like I made a joke one time during practice, lightheartedly, like, but kind of serious was we were having an issue. We were going to face a team. We tend to face a lot of teams that are 40, even fronts. We're going to face teams at 3, 4 front, and getting to back around a certain combo block. And I'm like, why aren't you guys down for you? Why aren't you talking? Like, who is not pointing out who's got who? Like, stop keeping secrets. And I said, if I gave all of you your phone, I'm sure you'd text each other.
Yep.
I got
Right.
right. You'd be so much faster to send each other a text of I'm going to this backer, you got that backer, than just look at each other and start pointing. Right? Go, just point, just do your deal. They're just not. It's just different because they have that technology. And who knows where it's going to go from here? Because now you got all the AI and GPT, they can just put in stuff. And, like my son is a college grad and he's in college personnel. And we were just doing a college all-star deal I coach in down in Texas this past weekend. And one of the coaches there is a friend of mine. He goes, hey, I'm applying for this job and I've got to, do a cover letter. My son's like, well, let me look at it. And within less than 3 minutes, he AI'd and redid the whole cover letter
Yeah.
for this guy. He's like,
Yeah.
and he sent it back to him on his phone and it go, like beep, beep, here's my notification. He goes, I got it already because I was thinking you're going to give it to me like Saturday or Sunday. And so does it create even a further separation? I don't think it is at the bigger levels, your division, like your big power high
Right.
schools.
Right.
But your lower level, like us, like where I'm at, a smaller high school, I think it's going to become more of like intramurals. Um, and it's back to make sure everybody gets their 10 plays and we're going to have a good time. And, it's become, I can just speak from some of the campus I see in the area is that football's become the reason to have the event, not the event. It's where the cheerleaders can cheer, the dance team can dance, the band can
Band can
play.
play.
Everyone gets their opportunity to do their thing, but it's not about the football game. Because we have the football game, we get to do all these other things.
Do you? Because I know California is like this, and I've talked about this a couple times, but Arizona 2 or 3 years ago, um, I think it started I can't remember. It was 2 or 3 years ago, but the Interscholastic Association approved, NIL deals for high school
Mhm.
athletes, and
Yeah, we have 'em.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I know you guys have them, but and I know there's quite a few other states that have them, but I voted no when we were asked as coaches, and I was probably in the lower 20 to 10% that voted no, and, it's pretty simple because I quite honestly, first of all, in my opinion, that's it, high school football is not a business. College football, even though it's big money and big business, it is not a business. It is not a career for athletes. Professional sports is a career for athletes. That's different.
correct. Right.
So when you go in the NIL for high school kids, kids don't know how to manage $10. They can't even keep their shorts in their locker, right? And then on top of that, the regulating why kids transfer, even though it's not legal for kids to transfer for NIL purposes. But how are you? If school A, if Temecula Valley has a kid who lives closer to Marietta Mesa, and I'm just saying this because of you and Oscar, lives closer to
Right.
Marietta Mesa, but goes to TV, and he walks into a sub shop next to Marietta Mesa where he lives, and the owner is a Marietta Mesa graduate and says, "Hey, if you transfer to Marietta Mesa, I'll give you $500 a week, just for telling people to come here."
Right.
How do you can't regulate that, whether it's CIF or AIA or any other interscholastic organization. Do you think that at least in where you're at, do you think that has the NIL stuff has anything to do in high school athletics with kids transferring.
I haven't seen a big NI in our area. Now, the problem that we have is that kids are allowed to transfer and it goes back to the star, right? He's a 3-star, he's a 4-star. What we have is a whole in our area are a lot of kids that think and parents, if I go to school, if I go to Centennial, I'm gonna get looks. So what I have is the issue of I'm like a FCS school is I'm gonna like this past year we played 8 sophomores and they started. They're pretty good. And if they stick together, they got a chance to win a league title. But there are some of them are already getting calls. Come over to, and I don't know what school, like, in our area, but there's schools in our area. Come over to us. TV is a Division 8 team. We're a Division 3 team. You're going to get more looks. You have a better chance to get the scholarship to Oregon. And they're just throwing these crazy names out there. And then I've got to sit with parents and I break down the numbers. Like, this is how many scholarships are available each year. This is how many are going to go to the portal. This is what Oregon's going to do for high school. And you go down the list. I go, and then it's even the height, weight, speed. Your son is 5'8". He's a good corner. He's a first team all league for us. He's not going to play at San Diego State. But they're telling, this school now, and there's schools that are bigger than us that are willing to take these kids because they're sophomores and they've been starters and they're a second team, first team, second team, all league guy, because now you got depth. And I get it, right? So a school, I don't know, you take a school, and I'll just use Mesa because I know Oscar, but they're in the Division 3 playoffs this year. So if he's gonna, and they're moving up. So our conference, we're split. We have 12 teams. We're split 6-6. This year, the bottom team from the top is coming down, which I believe is Roosevelt. The top team, which was Mesa, they're going up. So now they're in the group with Centennial and Norco and Vista Marietta and Marietta Valley, right? So how do I compete with them? Well, I got to get kids, right? And I've got to have a great scout team. I've got to have competition and I have to have depth. If you look at most of the schools in the area, your top 8, top 9 guys, we could probably compete with a lot of schools. But as you get into these bigger schools and they're rolling out 10 other guys for that's your special teams unit, right? Come to our school, you'll play. Well, you know what? You're on every special team. You're a starter, but you're a starter on special teams and you're doing all this. And the only kid is your first team receiver or running back. He's your best return guy in the league. So he's the one that's back there. Everyone else is new. You can't you just can't keep up with that. So I'm not seeing as much with money, come here for money. What I'm hearing or what I'm seeing is that these kids are getting contacted and saying, come to our place because you're going to get a better chance to get a bigger scholarship.
You know
And
that
and, it, and it's that type of recruiting.
that's just it's So I went to Loyola High School. The head coach there, Drew Casani, still one of my best friends. We were the same age. We were both captains. Won the state CIF Division 1, championship when we were seniors. But that was back in like 91. So it was a long time ago. But I know Drew and I know Loyola, like in late June, you probably saw it, early July, lost like 15 kids that transferred. Now,
Hmm.
most of them were starters, not all of them, but I would say 10 to 12 were starters. And of those starters, half of those guys, more than half, already had offers. And of those offer kids, a handful already committed somewhere. But yet they're transferring, and I'm not going to name the schools because I don't want to blast them. It's not fair to them. But they're going to some big schools, in Southern California. And
Right.
they already have offers. They've already committed. They're all CIF, all league. They're starters at Loyola, which is a good program. And I just, when I read that, I called him and I'm like, dude, not much I can say, but I'll tell you this, you have what you have. And as long as you stick with those guys, you can't do anything about it. Just move forward. It
Right.
sucks, but and that's happening everywhere. Even at schools where, you get 100 coaches in there in a spring, like Loyola, so
Yeah. Well, here's what from that aspect, what I'm hearing, 'cause we've had the situation around here as well. He's at one of our area schools, Riverside County schools, and he already has a Division 1 offer. He's already committed. He's got X amount of dollars in NIL. Why is he transferring for his senior year? Well, exposure. he may have had 4 Division I offers and he's taken the best one. But if I move up just a couple just a couple levels, and now I'm out there and I'm being and say, hey, you know what? I've got the San Diego State offer and I'm committed. Well, now with them going to a new conference, right? Now you're Pac-12, like the UCLA's, the SC's, your Ohio State's. Okay. So you go to that program, it's a little bit bigger, you're gonna get a little bit more exposure. And there's a chance that if I start and win a state title, I'm now renegotiating my NIL money. I want more. Right. So I'm gonna get more money. But the big schools, and I've come across this situation is you take a Power 4 school and here's a kid committed to a mid-major for X amount of dollars. The Power 4 schools are saying, look, we can pay you more. You're getting 750,000. We'll pay you 1.2 million. You come here and compete. There's no chance for that kid to compete. They've already got what they need. They already have their starter. Next year, if this kid leaves and jumps to another P4 school, they're going to go in the portal and get a P4 school, right? So they're trading, Alabama's traded with Ohio State, Ohio's traded with Oregon, Oregon's, kids going to Penn State, but they're keeping these kids for long-term backups. And these kids aren't going to play at these schools and they're going to be there for 2 years, realize that they've been a scout team guy, and now they've got to get in the portal where they going to end up at a mid-major or an FCS school.
That insight right there. Like I have never thought about how the college portal and NIL, how that has directly affected transfers at the high school level. But it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And wow, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I just learned something like you just blew my mind and it just opened up. Um, last thing I want to ask you is with everything that we've talked about, do you think there's anything that coaches at the high school level can do within their, state coaches association as a coaches association to help make sure that high school athletics stays about as amateur and about truly about what high school athletics is about? Is there anything that coaches can do besides just join their coaches association so they have a say and have a word in what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, if I could, do it, and I have some good guys in our area that we stay close to, but it's difficult because what's going to have to happen is, as coaches, we've got to be able to say, you know what, I want to play with my guys. I'm gonna stop going to your backyard. I'm gonna be a coach, right? But we also have coaches who are in the same spot. There's a big majority of coaches now that are the same as the kids. I want to be recognized. I want to be coach the All-Star game. I want to be on TV. I want to have the trophy. I want to be on Instagram. And it's a young generation of coaches, who are very much like the kids are. Like they want recognition. So, you know, I just had a situation with the coaches like, if I'm not going to coach varsity, I've been asked to help with the freshman team. I'm like, do you love football? If you really love football, go coach freshmen. I'll coach freshmen.
Right. So would I.
And I spent, and I've been 20 something years in professional football. I'm not saying I've got to only be in pro football or I need to be in a power four, conference type school. I like football. And if it means that a 14-year-old freshman group of kids need my help, I'm going to coach. But when coaches are like, you know what, man, you're right. I could come to your school and I could really help. But you know what? I just like being assistant over at Bosco or Modern Day or, because I get to walk out. I'm like, well, why not be the coach that helps build? Same thing I tell kids. Why do you want to go to a school where you're just going to be a guy? Be the kid that stays here and be the guy and be the one that turns this place around. It's just easier to go the other way. So I think if coaches got together and said, you know what, man, we're just not doing it anymore. I'm going to take my guys, you have your guys. I'm going to get involved in my athletic department and I'm going to hold CIF accountable because we all know that kids are moving and transferring and they're not technically moving. They're changing the paperwork. We know they're not moving. We know this. See, they're like, okay, well, they filled the paperwork, they stamped it, went to this AD, he rubber stamped it, went back to the other AD, he rubber stamped it because no one wants to get caught into the weeds, and you got to deal with it, right? I'm gonna live in the gray, collect my pay. I'm not gonna disrupt, what I need to do. And then CIF, they can't check all of it. There's so many transfers, they can't go knocking on doors. So I think until coaches, start saying, I'm going to do the policing in my conference and start calling people out, you know, I mean, you don't want to do that, but at some point, or, get rid of the whole, transfer. Like you just go. You can go whenever you want. You want to leave in the fall, you want to leave in the spring. Let's just
Just
be like
go.
college. Just
Well,
go to every school every year, go to a different school. And then you know what? Eventually, maybe that's what they want because eventually programs will fold because no one wants to coach anymore. And now you're down to instead of 2,400 schools, you're down to 1,200. I don't know.
well, I think, I think that that's a hard thing for a lot of coaches to do, is to call other coaches out. And when it's hard, I should say, when it's hard for certain coaches to call other coaches out, it's because they're probably dabbling in the same stuff.
Correct.
I mean, I know my ex-brother-in-law, head coach of Perry High School, he'd call people out. I mean, Perry High School is in the same region as Chandler, Hamilton, Basha, and he'd call people out left and right. He didn't care. And it was because he wasn't doing any of that stuff.
Right.
And I'll tell you this, and I'll leave it at that. I know I've made that mistake as a coach, chasing goals and thinking that if I went somewhere else that I would be able to achieve greater goals.
Mhm.
I know my dad, he left U of A and went to SC, and when he was done there and when he was retired, we had many conversations, and he regretted leaving U of A because he had everything he wanted as a coach there. The
Right.
appeal to go to SC, I don't wanna say it was ego driven, but it was goal driven, right? It was, where are you gonna go at the time to be the best of the best and win a national championship easier? Um, Brock Purdy, you talk about coaches and players, and what I'm getting out of what you're saying is that if you love the game of football, if you love coaching, if you love playing, just go play, go coach. Brock Purdy, prime example. And I just had this conversation 2 nights ago. So my ex-brother-in-law, my middle son played with Brock, was a starting linebacker Brock's 2 years, his junior and senior year, and at the same school. And you know, Brock could have gone to Alabama. He had an offer from Alabama, and he chose to go to Iowa State. Why? Because of what you said. Because he didn't live in his ego. The person you see on TV is him. That is him all the
Mhm.
time. The kid wearing the flannel that looks like he's 12 doing a press conference is him. Brock went to Iowa State because he fell in love with it on his trip, and he knew that he could be a difference maker. And a difference maker to him, impacting more people and being a leader and helping others improve and get better in a program, in a school, get that. It wasn't about going to Alabama, sitting on the bench for 2 or 3 years, maybe playing here and there, winning a couple national championships. It wasn't about that. It wasn't because he was scared, because he wasn't, because he would have gone there and done what he's done at being the last pick of the draft. John, I
Yeah.
really
I mean,
appreciate you, man. Go
well,
ahead.
I,
What were you gonna say?
well, I think you're going to start to see that going in the NFL, with the quarterbacks. They're transferring around so much that, you're going to take these guys in the first round, second round, and they're not ready because they've always gone to a better situation. They've never dealt with the adversity. They've never, like you just said, helped build a program, have been at that bottom part and build something up. There's so many lessons to be learned in that. And when you've always been at the top and had things pretty easy, and then all of a sudden, in the NFL, you're getting drafted near the bottom and it's hitting the fan. And now what do I do? You know? Um, but you know what? If I get back in, it looks like, I'm trying to work some things with, to scout Canada. And, if I do, I'm sure I'm going to try to get the Cardinals. So I'll be,
Okay. Well,
hit
we'll
up
be yeah,
Arizona.
we're moving back there, in June, so I'm still up in
And then I
Colorado,
got
so
the LA teams, of course. I get the LA and the Cowboys. So I'm
well,
around.
just shoot me a text when you know what's going on with you, just so I know where you're at and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate you, John. Your insight and expertise and knowledge has been tremendous. So thank you.
Anytime. I enjoy talking football.
Hey, just hang on just for a quick sec, okay?
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.